Hello, my name is Carrie Szwed, the Education Director at White Memorial Conservation Center, and thank you for joining me for my fifth and final episode of Nature's News. It has been really fun documenting and sharing some of the wonderful events happening in nature with you all over the past few weeks. And now here we are in the middle of June, and there's still so much going on in nature. So I'm going to show you a sampling of what I see both in my backyard and here on White Memorial property. So let's go see what we can find. Here's an example of a plant with 3 leaflets on the same stem. That is not poison ivy. This is a plant called Jack in the Pulpit. It's got this really cool flower inside, and that's Jack, and Jack is speaking from his pulpit like a preacher would speak from a pulpit, and so this is the pulpit that's kind of like enclosing him as he's speaking. So that's, not really the case. His name is not really Jack, and this is not really a pulpit, but that's where it gets the name Jack in the Pulpit, because of the structure of the flower. So I just did about 5 minutes of pond dipping, which is basically where you take a net and you put it down into the algae and the leaf litter at the bottom of the pond, and then you pull up scoops and you look through them to see what kind of critters are living in that habitat. And we had some pretty good success for only about 5 minutes. We've got, for one, we found some rather large snails right here. We'll get back to what this critter is, and this critter, and this critter, and this critter. I also found the claw of a crayfish, so when they shed their exoskeleton, sometimes you'll find pieces of the exoskeleton still left in the water. If we look way over here, I found a very tiny tadpole, probably from a toad. And like I said, I'm going to go back to these insects. If you see there's 6 legs, you know that they're insects. All right, I'm going to scoop up a few of these creatures just so you can see them a little bit closer. Now, a lot of people are not familiar with this animal, at least not in this life stage. You might be very familiar with what they look like as adults. But believe it or not, this is what baby dragonflies look like. We have 2 different species right here. So dragonflies start out their lives being hatched out of eggs in the water, and they spend at least 1 year, sometimes even more than a year, as nymphs, as dragonfly nymphs under the water, growing and catching prey. They're still carnivores under the water, but they're breathing through gills, and they're living there for a while until they get to the point where they go through an incomplete metamorphosis to become adults, and that's when we're used to seeing them flying around with wings. But the majority of their life is actually spent in this nymph stage. This invertebrate gets a bad rap, so I want to shed some light on the truth. A lot of people call these daddy longlegs, but in fact their official name is a harvestman. And not only is it not a spider, but it also does not have any venom. So if you've ever heard the urban myth that this is the most dangerous type of spider, but its mouth parts are too small to bite, well, it's probably true that the mouth parts are too small to bite, but even if they were big enough to bite, there would be no venom injected. This animal is not a spider, it has no venom, and is completely harmless. I know, not a sight that anyone really wants to see, but don't avert your eyes. This is an animal we definitely need to know about living here in Connecticut. This is a black-legged tick, otherwise known as a deer tick, and it is most famous for carrying certain pathogens in its saliva that can cause illnesses like Lyme disease, babesiosis, ehrlichiosis, anaplasmosis. So we need to make sure that we are aware of ticks being in our environment and make sure that we do a tick check once we're done in any natural area. So whether you're hiking or gardening or in any area where there might be leaf litter or overgrown vegetation, but they are basically just waiting to find a host to climb onto, whether it's a deer, a mouse, or a human being, or basically any other creature, any other warm-blooded creature. They latch on to that host and they do suck the blood. So we want to make sure that we find those ticks on our body before they have a chance to latch on, to embed, and definitely before they have a chance to transfer any of those pathogens. So I have heard that they cannot transfer the pathogens for
for 24 to 48 hours after embedding. I say, just to be really conservative, let's make sure we try to find those ticks within 12 hours. And again, if you do a tick check after each time you're out in nature, that's the best way to catch them early. If you do happen to find a tick that is already embedded, you need to just find a pair of tweezers and take it out as close to its head as possible. You don't need to use any other instruments or ointments. The best way is just using a pair of tweezers, and then wash that area with soap and water after the tick is removed. Go ahead and put the body of that tick in some Scotch tape. That will suffocate the tick, and also you can write the date on it so that you'll have that in case you do start to come down with any symptoms that seem a little suspicious, whether it's a fever or achy muscles, achy joints. You know the exact date that you were bit by that tick, and you can bring that information to the doctor with you. Please don't let ticks keep you from going outside and experiencing the wonders of nature. Just know that they are there, and stay educated about ticks and do those tick checks. Once it becomes part of your routine, it really isn't that hard to do.
So listen closely. I hear two main birds right now that are calling. The one that seems to be calling over and over again, almost like it's saying, here I am, over here. Look at me. Here I am, over here. That's called a red-eyed vireo. Red-eyed vireo. And they are all over the place, but they spend most of their time in the woods. A lot of people never see one, but once you know the call, it turns out no matter where you are in the woods, you'll probably hear that call during the spring and summertime. And the other bird that I heard calling every once in a while is called an American redstart, which is a type of warbler, a really pretty warbler. Doesn't have a really good, it's just called right there, doesn't have a good mnemonic to go with it, like a phrase. It basically just goes do 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 do. But what's fascinating about that bird is their coloration. They're so pretty. Just did it again.
Here is a quick sampling of some of the other birds seen on White Memorial's property recently. These photos were taken by local photographer Matt Balness. Here's a sweet little tiny bird called a blue-gray gnatcatcher. And here we have the beautiful northern or Baltimore oriole. This one here is a gorgeous shot of a yellow-rumped warbler. A type of woodpecker here called a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Look at these adorable Canada geese goslings. And here we have a male and female wood duck. And White Memorial is designated as an important bird area in the state of Connecticut because we do have about 250 bird species that make their way through our property, whether it's during migration or to breed or to spend their winters. Well, what do you know? I was working here late at night at home and I look out my window and this critter is stuck to it. This is a gray tree frog. And these are the frogs that are known for their sticky pads at the end of their digits, their toes, that helped them cling on to things, everything from tree trunks to windows, as you see right here. So he's just hanging out on my window and probably catching some of the many bugs that are flying around him at the moment. I just want to do a follow-up to my last Nature's News where we talked about safely carrying snapping turtles across the road, and I drove into work this morning and I happened to see this snapping turtle on our lawn, so I have a live example to work with here. So like I said before, you are going to only handle the turtle from halfway down the shell back. Please don't get your hands or your face anywhere near the front of the shell or the head. You are going to take both your hands and you're going to put one hand behind the shell on one side and one hand behind the shell on the other side. Now, you notice when I touch the turtle can feel that, and so it's going to have some sort of reaction. In that case, you saw the snap, and that's why we need to make sure that we keep our body on the back half. Don't go anywhere near the head. So once I have both of my hands secured on either side of the shell, I am going to pick up the turtle just like this. Okay.
I'll show you right here. Got one hand on either side. And this one is a snapper for sure, but she's giving you a good idea of what they can do. So I've just got the shell right above the legs, okay? Another option you can do is hold one hand on the shell and take the other hand and go underneath the turtle and pick it up like that so that you're supporting the turtle on the bottom side.
We have a wildlife camera in our backyard, and we were lucky enough to get some images of this mother white-tailed deer with her fawn. White-tailed deer can have 1 or 2 babies, sometimes 3, but rarely. And those fawns are often seen right next to their mother, like you see here. Looks like it actually may have been nursing time in these photos. But sometimes the mother will leave her fawns in a protected spot in the woods or in a tall patch of grass while she goes and browses for food. So that is why fawns have spots to stay camouflaged while laying and waiting for their mother to return. So if you happen to see a fawn on its own while you're exploring outside, that is perfectly normal. Please don't try to handle or move that fawn. If you have any questions or if you find an animal that you think might be in trouble, you can visit Connecticut Deep's webpage on dealing with distressed wildlife, which that page will also have a list of licensed wildlife rehabilitators that you can contact, and they can legally care for an animal if it has, in fact, been injured or orphaned in the wild. For our nature activity this time around, I'd like to recommend a place for you to go hiking. And that place is right on White Memorial's main property. It's called the Ongley Pond Trail. It's about a 1/4 mile long trail on level ground, and it is located very close to the main parking lot of White Memorial. It is an amazing place to see wildlife, especially for only a 1/4 mile trail. The amount of wildlife you can see is usually pretty phenomenal. I was just hiking there the other day and saw these 2 beavers munching on leaves at the back of the pond. You also have a really good chance of seeing turtles basking on the logs, sometimes even snakes on the shore or by the rock wall. You might see some pollinators flying around, some butterflies. There's a pollinator garden that is right next to the pond. You could possibly even scare a frog or 2 into the water as you're walking by the edge of the pond. And if you want, you can even bring a dip net like I did and dip into the water to see if you can catch any underwater creatures. So I definitely recommend hiking this Ongley Pond Trail. There's also an extension from the trail out to Bantam Lake on the lake trail, and that would extend your hike to about a mile-long loop. And you'll see some amazing things out at Bantam Lake and on that trail as well. So definitely come take a hike either on Ongley Pond Trail or any of the trails in White Memorial's 4,000-acre property. Or even if you have a trail nearby, just get out there and explore. Right next to me here, just kind of chilling out on the lawn, I have our grand finale. This lovely creature right here. This is Jacob. If you've been in the museum, which I know we haven't been able to do lately, but if you've been in the past, you might recognize him. He is the one live snake that lives in the museum. And he's also a record setter, not only here at White Memorial, but in general. The black rat snake is the longest type of snake in Connecticut. So Jacob here is probably about 5.5 feet long, and by the time he's fully grown, he could easily be 6 feet, maybe even a little bit more than that. They are non-venomous. Of course, I wouldn't be holding him if he were venomous. They certainly can still bite. All snakes can bite. Any animal with a mouth can bite. But they're not going to bite just for fun. They're not going to bite for no reason. A snake will bite if it feels threatened. It's really one of its main defense mechanisms. If you're an animal that doesn't have any legs, you have to have some sort of way to defend yourself, and biting is one of those ways. So if you see a snake in the wild, if it's not used to being handled, then I wouldn't really recommend picking it up unless you are willing to face the potential consequences, which would be getting bitten, getting pooped on, getting musked on, which is a really smelly secretion that snakes will release when they feel threatened as well.
So I would say leave wild snakes alone. They really don't want to get picked up. So I wanted to end our series by showing you just one example of the amazing diversity of natural life that we have all around us. Thank you so much for joining me for this last episode of Nature's News. I hope you've enjoyed being able to see and learn about some of the amazing phenomena that's happening all around us out in nature. If you want to jump on whitememorialcc.org, you can find out more about White Memorial's history and our organization and our property. And best of all, you can become a member and join the White Memorial family, which we would appreciate so, so very much. So thank you all. Have a wonderful summer and take care.